Good evening and welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study here at Talmadge Christian Fellowship. Let's start off in the book of Matthew, chapter 21. We have a story in Matthew 21, in Mark 11, and also John chapter 2. The question is, did Jesus ever get angry? And if he did, then we know that it's not a sin for us to get angry. But if we examine how he handled his anger and what he was angry about, it might give us a better idea. Because the fact of the matter is, on at least 4 occasions, Jesus, while in the flesh, got angry. So what did he do with that anger? And then if we go back to the fact that he was God in the flesh, God certainly got angry several times in the Bible, in both Testaments. Old Testament is replete with stories of God's anger and God's judgment. And then in the New Testament, even some New Testament believers got in trouble because they lied to the Spirit of God. So anger is a very, very real part of God's character, and it's a very real part of us. I don't know of anyone who could say they never got angry. There's several definitions, and the Greek and Hebrew are pretty close to our English translation of anger. Means to feel annoyed, and we all know what it means to be angry about something. So, Jesus clearly displayed this during his earthly life. Look in Matthew chapter 21, verse 12. And he went into the temple of God and cast out all of them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves. And he said unto them, It is written, My Father's house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of thieves. So we would call that righteous anger, righteous indignation. On another occasion, in Mark chapter 3, Jesus asked the religious leaders if it was okay to heal a person on the Sabbath day. And in Mark chapter 3, we find the words that when they wouldn't answer, he looked upon them with anger. That's Mark chapter 3, verse 5. So he was angry. Then he healed the man. But his anger centered on the attitudes of the religious teachers who claimed to know the law, yet cared more about themselves and the ritual rather than the man being healed on the wrong day. So yes, Jesus was angry at times, but Hebrews 4:15 said he didn't sin. Likewise, believers in Christ, we're taught in Ephesians chapter 4:26, be angry and sin not. So while anger is often viewed as a negative emotion, there are times when we can be angry for appropriate reasons. In the case of Jesus, the result was ungodly attitudes and actions by those around him. In the Old Testament, God displayed his anger when people sinned and injustices took place in the world. Still today, when Christians see sinful actions taking place, especially those who claim to be religious leaders, it should cause anger. Why? Because such anger reflects the attitude of Christ in these situations. So there is a time and a place for us to be angry. Jesus got angry, and we get angry. But what do we get angry about? And the anger of Jesus did not result in a long-term grudge or bitterness. He was angry, and then he got over it. It was an emotion that resulted in proper actions. Today's believers must seek the same response, because anger unchecked or wrongly motivated can result in long-term unforgiveness, and that'll cause problems in our life, resentment and unforgiveness. So yes, Jesus got angry on some occasions, and we will be angry on some occasions, but he was not known as an angry person. I think that's key. I think that's important. His anger was not an excuse for sinful actions, but rather for positive actions that helped others anger God. I read an article this week entitled, The Lord's Anger. 4 times Jesus did not turn the other cheek. Somehow or another, there's this thought out there that we should never get angry as believers, and that anger itself is a sin. But it's not the case. There's a difference between turning the other cheek when something personally has been done to you and being, I guess what I've always called righteously indignant. Think about something that angers you. Maybe some national sin or national problem or world problem. I can't think of anything much worse than child sex trafficking. If that doesn't make you angry, if that doesn't arise an anger response in us, then something's wrong. Something so horrible as that would probably be the greatest example I could think of other than abortion that should cause a righteous anger inside of us. So, Jesus also, in all the four Gospels, he showed the Father's love of compassion and healing and took the world's sin upon himself, but that does not mean there weren't times when he got angry. Matter of fact, if you read carefully, Jesus cleansed the temple twice. Once with a whip in the book of John, and then in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he overturned the tables. So his anger on at least two occasions were with religious leaders and were with church people, synagogue people. What they were doing was, because in the one instance, the people had to travel such a long way that they said, you know what, we can't take our sin offering all that journey. It took days and sometimes weeks where they had to go and follow the law. So the religious leaders had set up a system where they could buy the sin offering there. People didn't want it to get blemished. A lot of things could happen to a sin offering on that long of a journey. So we'll just buy one there. Well, how many cases in life have we encountered where people will price gouge because they know they've got a captive audience? Let alone if a tragedy happens or a hurricane strikes, gas stations and places that sell water are known to immediately hike up the prices. Now that's something I think we could be righteously angry about, because it's just not fair. Well, that's what angered Jesus. They were coming all this way, and then they said, yes, we have you can buy this heifer, and they would charge exuberant prices for it, when the people had one at home that was much less expensive and still their best. So that angered him. He said, this is a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves. Jesus saw corruption, and it made him angry. When we see corruption, it should make us angry. It just doesn't go with, we know it's not right. And when something's not right, we have a right to get angry with it. We don't have a right to keep a grudge. We don't have a right to have unforgiveness and resentment in our hearts. So there's a difference there. What else did Jesus get angry about? Well, in Matthew 23, he calls out the hypocrites. You can't read much of Matthew 23. Let's look at Matthew 23, 1 through 4. You can't read these verses and think that Jesus was just sitting calmly in a lotus position and saying these things. Verse 1, Then spake Jesus to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, The scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. Therefore, whatsoever they bid you to observe, that observe and do. But do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. They bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, and lay them on men's shoulders, and they themselves will not move one of their fingers. All of their works they do to be seen of men. They make broad their borders and enlarge their garments. And they love the uppermost room at feasts and chief seats in the synagogues, and being greeted in the market, called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. Be ye not called Rabbi, for one is your master, even Christ, and all ye are brethren. Skip down with me now to verse 13. Woe unto ye, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye shut up the kingdom of heaven against measure, and against men rather. For ye neither go in yourselves, neither allow ye them that are entering to go in. See, Jesus saw that as a crime. You've shut up heaven for yourself, but you're tying burdens on people so that they can't go in. Woe unto ye, scribes and Pharisees, verse 14, hypocrites! Exclamation point. He wasn't saying that calmly. This angered him. Ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense you make long prayers. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Woe unto ye, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! Again, verse 15. You can pass sea and land and make one proselyte. And when you've made him, you make him twofold the child of hell that you are. Woe unto you, you blind guides, which swear by the temple, swear by the gold of the temple. Ye fools and blind, what is greater, the gold or the temple that sanctifieth the gold? He goes on with that. The entire chapter, as a matter of fact. So he called out the hypocrites and he got angry about it. But he didn't let that consume him. He didn't let that hold a grudge. We know that on at least one occasion he had a private meeting with a person who's been called the silent or hidden disciple, Nicodemus. And Nicodemus came to him privately and said, Lord, I know you're a teacher from God. And he clearly wanted to find out what Jesus was all about. So I'm sure there were others. And I just can't imagine Jesus holding a grudge and saying, well, you did this back then, you're sorry for it. Now he would no doubt forgive them, and so should we. So should we. It's okay to be angry, but the perfect way to handle it is the Bible way. Do not let your wrath go down with you to sleep. Resolve it before you go to sleep. Now there's perfectly good physiological and scientific reason for that. Any student of human behavior knows that when you dwell on something all night long, it gets more ingrained than if you let it go. So it's always best to settle things that you can settle. Not everything can be settled that day. There are just some things that, might make us angry day after day. But if at all possible, I've found it's better to resolve it before bed. You sleep better, it doesn't work on your mind, and when you wake up, then you've thought all about that for 5, 6, 7 hours. So keeping in mind that Jesus is God, he doesn't change, and that because he showed anger on certain occasions, so can we. Don't forget, he is the same God who sent a plague that killed 24,000 Israelites for sexual immorality before a priest named Phinehas killed 2 people and subsided the Lord's anger in Numbers 25. God has shown his wrath. Genesis 7, he killed every living creature on the earth because of violence and corruption. Again, there were just reasons why he got angry. So there's going to be just reasons why we get angry. It's how we handle it. It's what we do about it. Righteous anger stems from an offense against God or his word. There was a Netflix show a while ago. I don't know how long, I don't even know the name of it. But it featured Jesus as a homosexual. Now that angers us as believers because it's blasphemy. And righteous anger was the correct response in this case. So again, just so we know, there's righteous anger and there's unrighteous anger. One of the ways to look at it is righteous anger, you'll be caring about others. It attacks the sin instead of the sinner. Like a doctor trying to destroy any trace of a disease. We point out someone's incorrect thinking or actions to bring them to a path of righteousness, to bring them to a path of wisdom, not to hurt them or tear them down. Now, expressing our righteous anger should be a last resort, not the first. Even as Jesus flipped the tables, he had spent a great deal of his ministry turning the other cheek. Just look in Matthew chapter 5 to see that. Righteous anger doesn't blast others out of petty reasons or non-essential doctrines. People have fought in churches over the years over non-essential doctrines. Churches have split over non-essential doctrines. Believers have not spoken to each other for days and weeks on end because of non-essential doctrines, as to what type of worship style you should enjoy. That's silly. Righteous anger doesn't refrain from self-control, but it tries to speak the truth in love, and that's what we're called to do. Very easy for us to become angry and unrighteous. Again, anger's not the sin, but acting upon it in some circumstances can be. A lot of counselors say there's 3 faces of anger: explosive, brewing, and embittered. I thought that was pretty good. All those can lead to sin: explosive, brewing, and embittered. Explosive anger causes people to say hurtful things. Consumed by anger, we don't temper our words in the process of expressing it. Stewing in embittered anger can blow the situation out of proportion. You take something small and make it big. It can cause deep rifts in a relationship. Unlike righteous anger, unrighteous anger seeks to hurt. It doesn't care about the person it's directed toward. Even if we have the best of intentions, our anger should never oppose love, forgiveness, and respect. So anger is a normal human emotion. We all experience it. We should all learn how to control it. And it's okay to be angry, righteously indignant, but it's not okay to stay there. It's better to resolve it, express yourself, and move on. I don't know who's better at that, men or women. I think sometimes it's mixed. Women can stay angry too. Wives can stay angry. Husbands can stay angry. I guess if I had to pick on what my observation's been, it's that men have a tendency to stay angry longer. That's just my opinion. So, anyways, anger. It's normal. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to express it. But make sure it's righteous anger.